Hello and welcome to a new video on hack viewership and the myth of complete. A quick analysis. So what is this? So I want to tee up what the myth is that I'm talking about. And I think there's this general sentiment or myth in the hack ROM community or the ROM hack community or just Fire Emblem community in general that there's a lot less interest in a hack project if it is currently in develop and not complete. So by in development, I mean actively being worked on, but not finished. And it's understandable why, from a player perspective, this is true. There's a lot of people who want to play something start to finish that is like a fully coherent story and that they can grow their units all the way to the end, whatever it might be. And I think that this also persists among the YouTubing community. And while the past few years I've noticed that there's been a brand new crop of Fire Emblem YouTubing that's taken place, especially around hacking and people doing LPs of hacks, which is really exciting and not something that existed all that long ago. Like, this is a very new development and it's super exciting. However, one thing I have noticed is that there's been an aversion to incomplete projects or projects that are currently in development. And I know from listening to other folks talk about it and just kind of seeing the general sentiment, there seems to be this myth that people don't really care about projects that are in development and they only want to see stuff that's complete. And again, while I think from a player's perspective that might make sense, I think from a viewer's perspective, looking at you, Fire Emblem video creator, and whatever you're producing, that there might actually be more interest in development projects than you think. And so I actually did this analysis yesterday, and I wanted to do a deep dive to understand the data. I've played a mix of complete, unfinished, and in-development projects over the past 2 years. My channel is now almost 3 years old. Or almost 2, I should say. Yeah. But my main point being that the incompleteness of the completeness of a project doesn't necessarily affect views as significantly as one might think. So I want to do a data analysis, and I'm going to talk you through the study that we did today to show that there really is this myth of complete and what you might be able to learn from that. So let's get started. So what is the scope of this analysis? I looked at all of the different video playlists that I've created since 2019, and I reviewed them by their status and year, so 2019 and 2020, and I looked by in development, complete, and unfinished. The difference here is that in development is a project that is actively in development at time of recording, so I was specifically recording a project that is actively being worked on to give the creator feedback. Complete projects are projects that are totally done, whether that means it's full length, whether that means it is not really for feedback purposes. The point is that I was able to play the hack from start to finish without necessarily providing feedback for the intent of it being actioned on in a future update. And then unfinished projects, this is basically the Dream of 5 category, but this is for all projects that are incomplete or that were in development and never finished, but that were played, but not necessarily for a specific update. So this is basically like the dead hack category. The way I assessed the viewership was to look at the peak view counts, which tend to be on the first and last video. Across almost every playlist on my channel, I've noticed that the first video and the last video tend to be the two highest performing videos, just in general. And so I figured that instead of looking at total views, or just one, that getting an average of peak views of first and last would be most compelling, because not only would that show what does the height of viewership look like, but also what is the retention over the course of a series. And there are some interesting notes there. And then I want to average and compare to see which types of projects are most popular. So of course there's a lot of considerations to make with an analysis by this, and by no means is what I'm doing and what I'm about to present gospel, but it's data and we can interpret that data in different ways. And so there's a couple things that we need to consider. One, beyond the sample size, that's the obvious one. The sample size is really small. There's not that many different projects to analyze, and there's not a lot of things that are totally one-to-one comparison. Like, there are no complete projects that I recorded in 2019, for example, right? And so that kind of like can skew data, because the channel in 2019 was like fewer than 100 subscribers, and so the viewer counts are naturally going to be lower than they were in 2020, where the subscriber count was much higher. So similarly, the influence of channel size and view on older content. Then also there's video length, length of series, and age of video. These are all things that are potential impacts to the cleanliness of the data and things that can skew one way or another. For example, a lot of in development projects and videos are from 2019 when the channel was smaller. There's also a length consideration. Some of the video series are only 3 videos long, others are over 40. Some videos are naturally going to perform worse because of their length, and that's something that we see time and time again, and I see it just from looking at some of the shorter ones and the longer ones. Shorter videos get more views. I don't know if it's how the views are calculated or if it's just the nature of people watching a shorter video more frequently. I'm not sure. Maybe someone with more Fire Emblem or just YouTube experience can share, but these are all impacts. And again, this is not a perfect science. I did this for my own curiosity and really to see if this myth of completeness really held any water when up to some degree of scrutiny. So here's a list of complete projects that I've recorded. All of these are from 2020, and you can see here just the quick stats. I included my FE6 Iron Man run with Zenith just as a comparison point. You can see that the peak viewership here, which is again the average of those first and last videos, was 478 across these 3 series, or if you take out FE6 and only look at hack projects, it actually goes up to 535. Again, there's a lot of different factors that I think could have impacted this. The FE6 Iron Man did take a really long time. The videos were all like an hour long because we did it in one take. So something to consider there as well. But the main piece to call out here is, I think, to note, even though the peak viewership was 535, what was most notable is that among complete projects, the retention rate from first to last video was pretty significant, was pretty solid. It held pretty steady. But I don't want to spend too much time here. Unfinished projects, aka the Dream of 5 category. This performed the worst of the 3 different groups, and you can see here that while some of the first videos on those Dream of 5 playlists were pretty decent by my channel standards, the last video definitely see a drop off. Death or Glory also kind of towards the bottom. That one's also an unfinished LP, which maybe I'll get back to at some point, probably not, but wanted to call it out anyway. And it's a much older one besides. So again, interesting notes here on number of views. Now we get into in development. I broke this up into 2019 and 2020. When I started my YouTube channel, my main purpose was to just use YouTube as a vehicle for recording feedback for people so that they can go back and access playtests of me playing their hack and sharing my comments so that it can help them either fix bugs or make any gameplay or writing improvements that I shared. You can see there's a lot of different projects here, and it varies pretty wildly over the course of 2019. Some of it is because that's when the channel first got started, and so we have videos like Faith and Blood, Heroes We Deserve, 7 Siblings, Legends of Avenir. Like, all these recordings were done when there were fewer than 100 subscribers. So you can imagine that viewership is generally going to be a bit lower. I think for Faith and Blood, it's the first video on the channel, so that might spike this up a little bit. Because people might see, like, what's the first video that's ever been done? And they'll click on this one. And then we have a few others over here. Souls of the Forest, definitely the outlier in this section here. And that's because Souls of the Forest is pretty popular and has been played elsewhere. But I do want to call out that it's the longest series I have. I think even longer than anything complete that I've done. It took me a while to beat it. And it's got 1,246 views on the first video as of yesterday. And overall for 2019, the average peak was 378. So less than overall complete, but less than complete here. But let's look at in development in 2020, 2021. And this was a much shorter year. I only recorded for about 6 months out of last year. So there's not nearly as many, and also some of the things I did were longer. But you can see here, overall view counts last year were really strong. I think a big reason for this is twofold. One, Sacred Echoes is super popular. It's a demake of Gaiden, or a reimagining of Gaiden and Fire Emblem Echoes, but also the channel was much bigger going through 2020, and so these average view counts are much greater, and you can see here the data is pretty heavily skewed. 1,131 views per peak video, 574 views without Sacred Echoes. That in 2020 exceeds what we saw with complete projects over the same year, which I think is worth calling out, and I think that's interesting. I have journeys listed here because the series is still running, but it's not included in the analysis, but even that would be above the average going into 2021. So clearly there's an uptick in interest, and part of that is due to the channel size, but also I think there's something to be said here with these numbers around projects that are in development, that are eye-catching. So I do want to give a shout out to Warpath, famed hack creator of Fire Emblem The Seven Siblings, and also noteworthy Fire Emblem universe statistician. He did a really quick table and some plots that I'm going to show you to help visualize this data to give you a sense of the viewership numbers here. And you can see here that across everything in each of these different categories, in development definitely was the first video mean peak. Last video mean, however, went to complete, so we see greater retention among complete videos on average. But the overall mean of average, so across both first and last peak, we see that in development actually does score over 100 views more than complete projects. Now again, we're basically comparing it to two complete projects. Could I have played something different and maybe that would have generated more interest? Yes, but that's true of anything in development too, so it's hard to necessarily say one way or the other. Again, the sample size is really small, but I thought it was interesting that in development projects on average, in their peak videos, got more views than something that was complete. So here's a quick chart of everything, and again, credits to Warpath who put this together, and he wanted me to call out that he was very proud that Seven Siblings, his hack, was dead last in terms of overall viewership. But you can see here, this is what the chart looks like, and so you can kind of see there's not really a ton of rhyme or reason to performance across different projects of whether it's complete or not. It's really seemingly to be a lot more about just what people are interested in, or the timing. Right, there's so many different factors that can play into viewership, and of course, like for my specific YouTube use case, it's pretty small, and so there's definitely going to be more fluctuation. But I wanted to plot out this data to show just how viewership changes across these different categories, because that's usually the way we talk about projects. Is the hack complete? Oh, then I'm not interested. Thank you. So I wanted to see if that myth was true. You might notice that Sacred Echoes is missing, and that's because this is what the chart looks like if you put Sacred Echoes in there. It's totally an outlier. And there's a number of reasons for that. One, it's amazing. Two, it's using pre-established work, so I think it's going to draw in a broader audience in general than many of these other hacks, which are pretty much, with the exception of Fire Emblem 6, all original works, which I think generally just are going to get fewer views than something like Sacred Echoes, and I think that's really more of a testament to its quality and the work that Hypergamma Spaces has done. So in conclusion, completeness isn't all that matters. And I hope that you, as someone who is playing a project, or, I mean, really this video is for people who play hacks on YouTube, because I've seen a lot of new YouTubers come up that play hacks, and it's super exciting. But I would encourage you to consider playing in development projects, especially if you're a viewer-conscious YouTuber. I feel like I'm kind of an anomaly in that my channel, I think, exists predominantly to give feedback to in-development projects, so maybe that's also biasing the data. But don't stop yourself from playing things that are in development and sharing feedback with hack creators and working with them and helping them. Because I know for me, as someone who's made a hack, seeing someone else play it, especially when I was developing it, was super helpful. And I know from my experience doing this for the past couple of years that it's been very helpful for the hack creators as well to see someone, especially someone who's not very good at Fire Emblem like me, play their projects and share my thoughts and feedback and give them, a little bit of exposure through YouTube, but also, more importantly, giving them feedback and having someone dive into their work and share their thoughts and feelings as they're playing it. It's so valuable to watch someone else play. And you, as someone who is recording YouTube or recording videos of Fire Emblem, consider that you might be able to do something really productive and help create more complete hacks for yourself and everyone to play end-to-end. So I'm pretty satisfied with what the data showed me. I don't think there's really anything super conclusive that we can draw, but I will say that completeness isn't the be-all, end-all. Being a complete hack doesn't necessarily mean you will get more views than something that is incomplete. There's other factors at work that need to be considered, and I guess we'll continue to try and figure out what those are. But I hope that this was helpful. I thought it was a pretty interesting little analysis. I wanted to do this real quick to share the data and findings. Again, major thank you to Warpath for helping visualize some of the data. And thanks to all of you who, want me to play their hacks and share my thoughts and feelings on them. It's really fun for me, and I'm glad it seems for viewers that they also seem to enjoy it. So I'm hoping that this is useful. And again, play incomplete projects. In development, ROM hackers need you to give feedback because that's what's going to help propel projects to being complete. And nothing's worse than being like, oh, great, a new complete hack, and then being like, wait, this stinks. Did anyone playtest this? And it's like, no. Gotta playtest stuff, guys. So sometimes it's gotta be you. But anyway, completeness isn't all that matters. Help in development ROM hackers. In development hacks. The ROM hackers developing in development hacks. There we go. I didn't have my coffee yet, guys. But anyway, completeness isn't all that matters. Take care, be safe, and enjoy. Let me know what you think in the comments.